We have entered an age where it is unlike anything that has happened historically in this world before. Around about 1919, 1920, they came up with the idea of the consumer economic system. And the foundation of that system, and the only way in which consumer economics can work, it is entirely dependent upon the consumer consuming things. And one of the early propounders of this idea, or at least putting words out in the public, was a famous banker from Lehman Brothers. His name was Paul Mazur. And he openly advocated that for society to really change, there was going to be this need for economic development. There was going to be this need to turn entire societies from a needs-based life to a desires-based life, where instead of buying things because you needed them, like buying a new pair of shoes because the sole in the old ones that you've been wearing for the last few years is worn down and it's now got a hole in it. Instead of buying things as you need them, he openly advocated this idea that you need to get people to desire things even before the old stuff they have is fully utilized or worn out. And so we have this new world in which we live, and which we are entirely mindless about. We take it that this is the way things are and this is the way people have lived, and it's actually not true. For hundreds and even thousands of years, people did not live with this ideology. In spiritual life, the ideal spiritualist, someone who is actually successful, they have a Sanskrit word to describe such a person. It is the word Atmarama. Atmarama. Atma means the self, and Rama means one who is enjoying. And it literally means one who is satisfied, who is self-satisfied, who is not dependent upon or looking for anything outside of their body to find fulfillment. Such a person is a complete disaster for the consumer economic system. A consumer economic system requires people to be greedy for more, to be always dissatisfied, to be cultivating endless desire and seeking to fulfill it. That's the world we live in. And you ask, well, what is it for? And the big driver is this thing called economic development or economic growth. When the economy stops growing, all the politicians, the bankers, the economists, everybody starts spazzing out. And they want to stimulate consumer confidence. You've heard these kind of words before? And it's really an amazing thing, because instead of the economy serving people, all people have become servants of the economy. It's like the economy is God. And there is this complete obsession with growth, economic growth. But if you ask even the greatest economists in the world, what is it that you are growing into? What is that point where you are trying to reach that is considered the perfection, and once you're there, everything is completely okay, it's all cool? What is that point? They look at you with a bewildered look on their face, like you're an idiot, you don't understand anything. But personally, being less than humble myself, I think they're the idiots. If you saw some farmer and you saw him every day, he's planted something and he's maintaining it and he's watering it and fertilizing it, and you ask him, what exactly are you doing? He goes, I'm growing this crop. And you go, okay, well, what's the outcome of it? And, what? No, I'm just growing it. Yeah, what is it going to, where does it reach its maturity, where you actually harvest something? No. We're just growing. Every day we're growing. That's all we're doing. I'm out here for 20 years just growing this stuff. It's like somebody would call, the health services, the mental hotline. We got a problem here. But we have become very complacent. We just go along to get along. We don't want to really ask the questions quite often because we're not sure that anybody has got any answers. And this is all we've known in our life, and so this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to teach our kids to do. This is the most appalling situation. And it is not bearing any fruit. People are not more satisfied than they used to be. People are not more peaceful than they used to be. Our world is not more beautiful than it used to be. And so it's like, what's happened to the big thinkers? The people that used to step back and look at what's going on in society and ask these kind of questions and raise them to everybody. You don't see it. Everybody has become victimized by the materialistic and hedonistic philosophy and are just living this life, although it is incredibly unproductive. It doesn't produce the things that we actually need. But we just keep doing it because we don't know what else to do. We don't even think about it. I was once speaking before a Catholic audience in the Philippines, and I asked people if they knew what the 10 Commandments were. And of course everybody says they know what it is. It's kind of like a little bit embarrassing if you claim to be a Christian or a Jew and you don't know what are the 10 Commandments. And everybody understands, they've got this understanding that any of these transgressions against these principles are considered very destructive to individuals. When I was a kid, I heard this term, the 7 deadly sins. Have you heard that term before, the 7 deadly sins? So, I mean, in recent times, the only reference people have to this is, you know, that weird movie, Seven, and, you know, where somebody was killing people that were, you know, absorbed in one of those so-called 7 deadly sins. And they were called deadly because if you acquired one of these qualities, it was considered utterly destructive. And most people don't even know what they are anymore. But the general, just in general, even people, we're not talking about people that were very religious or anything, just in general, society, 50, 60 years ago, they had this understanding that if people had these kind of characteristics, you sort of avoid them. They're not kind of people that you want to hang out with. Just mentioning 3 of them or 4 of them: avarice, greed, lust, pride. You know, if somebody was in that world, they were to be avoided. And it was understood that these things were detrimental to your well-being, to your peace, and to your happiness. It was understood that if you pursued any of these things, it will be impossible for you to know peace in your life. Nowadays, these things are considered desirable. You know what avarice is? It's the greed for money. That was considered, a person that was greedy for money was considered very degraded, and their life will be filled with disturbance. We're not talking about, you know, the honest pursuit of some livelihood. We're talking about, you know, really being preoccupied with the acquisition of wealth. Nowadays, if you are a person of great pride, which was considered really a destructive thing also, and counterproductive to leading a peaceful and happy life. If you have, you know, very high esteem for yourself and you are prideful, if you are really hungry for power and hungry for money, now they describe you as highly motivated. And you're the type of person that corporations seek to recruit and employ. And they want such high-level management to pass on these qualities to their employees. Because when everybody gets motivated, the big boys really start making the money. But there is not this understanding of the destructive nature of these things. Society as a largely has become not immoral necessarily, well, yeah, wrong, largely immoral, and almost totally amoral. Nobody takes a moral position on anything. So when I was addressing this, these guys from what was called the Council of Laity, they're like all the big leaders in the Catholic Church, and there's a few hundred of them. So I asked these guys, well, you know, have you heard of this? One of the 10 Commandments was, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods." And attached to that was, "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife." And it's like, yeah, everybody kind of remembered that from when learning it when they were a kid or something. So I said, you look at the world today, and we have an entire economic system that is totally built on the principle of coveting what others have. It's called advertising. Nobody, just appears on TV, or you don't even have a person. You just have this product pop up, coconut water. You can get it for $1, whatever, or $2 at this place. Thank you. That doesn't happen. You're going to have some really cool guy or some really spunky chick, and they're just going to be, this may not even feature, it may be even just out there somewhere, and they're doing some really hot thing, right? And it's like, and everybody looks at that and they go, I want some of that. And then all of a sudden, yeah, coconut water, okay, and it's this really intense psychological manipulation. The advertising companies have perfected psychological manipulation. They know precisely who is their target market, and they will choose models that their target market find attractive, whether it's a frumpy housewife, just a laid-back mom, or some hardcore trucker dude, or some, Aussie rules football player, whatever it is. They've identified the kind of personality that their target market is drawn to. And then they have them engage. It's called lifestyle advertising, where you don't push the product necessarily really hard. You do something hilariously funny, or something just like really out of it, or something just like really cool, and then there's a product sort of like mentioned and tied to it. And the people that run advertising agencies, you can go to them and you say, currently our product has like 14% market share, and we'd like to raise that. What do we need to do? In other words, a certain number of people are buying and other people are not buying. They will sit around and brainstorm it. It's not just people pulling ideas out of the air. They have trained individuals that they consult with who develop campaigns, and they do target research. They bring in a certain number of people, they expose them to stuff, and they get people's reaction, and they're monitoring them, they're watching what's happening to people's heartbeats and their eyes, where their eyes are going, and how they're responding to everything. And then based on all of this research and everything, and knowing how to manipulate people, they pull it all together in a campaign, and they will tell you, you need to spend X amount of dollars. You're going to spend a certain amount on drive time radio on these stations. You're going to do a certain amount of advertising on the air. You're going to be doing social media activity like this. They'll lay it all out for you and how much you have to spend. And they will pretty much tell you, we can probably, with this, spending this much money, you should expect that your sales are going to be increasing by, 10%, 20%, 50%, depending on the nature of the campaign and how can they do that? They can do that because they've become expert at manipulation, getting you to do something that you wouldn't normally do without somebody pushing you to do it. You already exist in a world where you have been convinced that there is this constant need to buy and consume, that happiness is just around the corner. All you need is the new thing. You've got people that just say they're not into what society's doing. We're rebels, we're out there, and then they're just being manipulated by companies like Billabong or whatever, who's selling to the rebel image kind of trip or whatever, and not that I'm trying to pick on Billabong or anything. It's just practical reality. throughout this whole process, there is, this constant idea that we need to be always thinking about something. Now, something that advertisers have really been able to capture is a fundamental spiritual principle. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, instructing Arjuna, is talking about the effects of self-centeredness and the effects of the cultivation of desire. And I promise you, once you plug in and you follow a certain path, it never ends well. So in one of these verses, he begins that while contemplating the objects of the senses, one develops attachment. And this is what advertising is all about. They're trying to capture you somehow or other and get you to contemplate and consider. So whether it's watching, an ad, watching someone or something, whether it's, reading magazine, you're just constantly being bombarded with an invitation to contemplate the objects of the senses. Americans are like, these guys are so hardcore. They perfected marketing a long time ago, and they became really good at how to sell stuff. So you walk into certain shops, and instead of, don't touch anything, there'll be signs, please handle the merchandise. Because they know when you pick it up and start touching it and smelling it or looking at it and stroking it, whatever you're going to do, you're going to start developing a sense of attachment to that thing. You're not even sure how and why it's happening, but it does happen. And the more a person is able to contemplate, the stronger that sense of attachment becomes. And they've got a whole system of how to sell stuff. You get the customer, whether it's a car salesman or a piano salesman or somebody selling a house or whatever, or sweaters, you get people to actually start really contemplating these objects. I mean, they may not have even thought about it that much before. And then the more they contemplate it, and then the salesman's always leading them to, did you notice the wood grain on this thing? I mean, look at that. Look at it in the light like this. And people say, and they just got all of these, it's trickery. It's devices to get you more into contemplating. So the way in which people stock shelves in stores, the way in which merchandise is displayed, anybody that's involved in this industry will attest to the effectiveness of these different things to get the suckers to start really thinking about this stuff. By contemplating the objects of the senses, one develops attachment. From attachment will grow intense desire. So you start off with just the idea that, yeah, it's interesting, that's kind of neat and everything, and just by going through that process, some attachment grows, and then you consider or reconsider or contemplate on it further and build on that until it comes to the point where a person feels they need to do it. And this can happen in a second, with what they call impulse buying, where somebody's looking for something and they will see something that's already registered in their head and they'll just reach out and grab it and put it in the shopping cart. By contemplating the object of the senses, one develops attachment. From attachment comes, in Sanskrit, the word is kama, which literally means lust. Lust as a sexual expression where somebody is just like totally out of control and they just need to, you know, go have sex somehow or other with someone or other or something or other. That of course is one thing that a lot of people can sort of relate to, how you can completely have lost the plot. You don't care what time of day it is when you are so caught up in desire. What's going on around you and what you're going to be doing in 2 hours or what's happening tomorrow is all completely irrelevant. You're just lost in this moment. And what it is about intense self-centeredness. It's all about me at this moment, and it's all about what I hope to experience as a result of something. The problem is that when a person becomes entangled by contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them, and from such attachment lust develops. And now here's a big jump. And from lust, anger arises. It's like, what? What's the connection? Where does anger come from? Is anger good to experience in your life, either from yourself, from within yourself, or from somebody else? Is it a really cool experience? Or is it one of the most horrible experiences? And yet, you look how angry we all are. You know, when someone is supposedly having a bad day, and all it takes is a little tiny poke. And people want to blame all kinds of things for it. But what is not understood from a spiritual perspective, no one makes you angry. The anger is already residing within your heart, just like fire resides within wood. It's not apparent, but fire resides within wood. And it's like, what's this guy talking about? Well, if I take a match and I light a piece of wood with it, how big is the fire on the end of a match? It's a little tiny thing. But when I set, a bonfire going, where does all that fire come from? It hasn't come from the match. That's just a little tiny thing. That potential, that energy is stored within the wood. And now it is being released and it is manifesting. In the same way, when we live a type of lifestyle that will make it so that anger resides, it dwells within our heart, then it doesn't take very much for this anger to manifest. And what people do not understand is that it is this whole process of constantly desiring and hankering for things that lead to the establishment of anger within the heart. And the anger will be there for two particular reasons. One is, I desire something and I cannot get it, and therefore I feel frustrated and I will feel anger. Maybe not immediately, and I may not connect it with it, but if you look at it and examine very carefully, it is there, and that is why it is there. Or, I get what I want. I get what I want. Then having got what I want, it did not fulfill me. It didn't deliver on the promise. And so I just get pissed off, or I feel disappointed and get all grumpy. And it's just like, whether I show it outwardly or not, this is actually what's going on internally. And the more that you go down that path, and the more that you engage in this process of contemplating on things and cultivating desire and letting that build into intense desire, and then experiencing the result of intense desire, whether it's so-called fulfillment, where you get what you want, or you get frustrated in the attempt, it will plant increasingly more and more seeds of anger within your heart. So you'll notice that in this world, that there are some people that are actually very placid and easygoing, and there are other people that are just like angry at everything. They're just on a bummer all the time. They're just so easy to set off. You don't even have to do very much, and they're just going to go ballistic. There's going to be a volcanic eruption of anger. And then all the unpleasantness that comes from it. The very big problem with anger is that one loses their intelligence when they are consumed by anger. You no longer are able to act in a balanced way. You will say and do things that are incredibly hurtful. You inflict damage on others and on yourself by letting loose, by being overwhelmed with anger. I mean, we want to have a world where we're not confronted or experiencing, either from within our own heart or from others, anger, you know, and just all this craziness. Oh my God. People throwing things at each other, husbands and wives screaming and going off, and the kids all freaking out because they're so fearful. And that's probably never happened to you guys, right? And it's the norm. This is normal. This is considered normal. You know, oh, it's no big deal. We just had a bit of a fight. Yeah, I mean, you scared the shit out of all the kids. You're completely altering their lives and how they are going to respond to things. You're just building these cycles of perpetuating violence and anger and mistrust, and just, it's just, you know, we create these worlds by our actions. And nobody's telling us that if you go down this path of constantly stimulating desire, that it is going to end very badly for you. We are in fact convinced that by stimulating desire and wants and seeking to fulfill them, that we will actually find fulfillment. And our experience is that that is not true, but we don't think about it. We lose the plot. Spiritual life, the cultivation of spiritual life, it's not like a person, you know, has their regular kind of life and then they've got a little cubbyhole time where they, you know, retreat from things and try and be more spiritual, and then they go back to their other thing. No, material in life and spiritual life are diametrically opposed. Spiritual life, the foundation of spiritual life is that I am a spiritual being. I'm not this body. No matter how much stuff I cram into every orifice on my body, I will never experience the happiness I desire. And there's a reason for it. The material energy, atoms, let's look at atoms. Atoms, they do not contain the tiniest drop of blissfulness. They don't contain the tiniest drop of happiness. It's not what atoms are. So why do you think that just by having all these restructured atoms and kind of forcibly stuffing them into your orifices and body and everything, that you are going to derive happiness. No, you're going to stimulate your senses. You might have a sensory response. You may have an ear, an eye, a nose, a genital orgasm. But it doesn't fulfill you. In fact, you're left wanting more. Instead of the fire of desire being quenched, you've poured gasoline on it, and now it burns hotter and brighter. A spiritual life is lived with the understanding that I am this spiritual being, and the understanding that this world is two things. It is impermanent, and it is transitory. How can you build a life of complete happiness? It's like building a sandcastle on the seashore at low tide. You can do the most spectacular sand sculpture, but as soon as the tide comes in, it is all washed away. That is material life. You cannot find a permanent position of happiness within the material sphere. Spiritual life is the opposite. The focus is not on that which is impermanent or transitory. It is upon that which is eternal. Starting with myself, I am an eternal spiritual being. And my quest for happiness should be something that actually delivers the goods. So it's a big and interesting subject. Was this in any way helpful? Food for thought in your life, or what? You know, one definition of insanity is to repeatedly do the same thing and think that you're going to somehow get a different result. You do this thing, and the result will always be the same. You pursue material life, it will always be the same. People think, okay, maybe what I need is put more hot sauce on it. I need to spice it up. I need to add something a little bit more interesting, a new twist. We've got to tweak it. We've got to turn up the volume. We've got to increase the sensation. That somehow that this is going to deliver the goods. No, what happens is you start sliding in the other direction. You are assured of ever increasing levels of depression, of emptiness, of loneliness, of sadness, a lack of fulfillment. So, you know, there is a solution. There is something that you can do. There is a way in which you can live your life, but yet be untouched by this world. And they give the example, you see it in the Vedic and in spiritual things a lot, of a lotus flower. If you ever see not cultivated but in a wild place lotus flowers, they often grow in really scummy ponds where the water is not very pleasant and everything. But yet they rise out and rise above their environment, and they bloom, and they are fragrant, and they're amazing to see. Full blooming lotuses, you know, they're just like so amazing. And this is the example that is used of what we can do to actually move through this life with a different focus, where to the common person, a common person may look at an actual transcendentalist and not be able to see anything different They just see what may be an ordinary person. But yet, the transcendentalist is living in the world, but they are not of this world. That is the difference. So the cultivation of spiritual understanding, and to seek direction and to take direction and try to begin applying to my life is all important. But what we need is something that is going to be completely transformative. Completely transformative. Can I use a gross example? Who's into dog shit? It stinks. You step in dog shit and step in the car. I mean, you're going to have a bad week. You're not going to have a bad day. Maybe 2 weeks. You ain't going to get rid of that smell for a long time. It's grotesque stuff. But if it is, a dog takes a dump on the grass somewhere and nobody picks it up, what happens over time? Because of the sun its influence will remove that bad smell. It will actually have an antiseptic effect. It will turn it into almost like white chalky substance that doesn't smell at all and is not diseased or, dirty. And it will gradually break down, and it's like it wasn't there. This is the influence of the sun. In exactly the same type of way, by bathing ourselves in this transcendental sound, these mantras, these spiritual sounds, what we are doing is we are exposing ourselves to something that is actually all purifying, that will have a profound effect on our life. And to do this on a regular basis is the most essential component of developing a real and living a real spiritual life. It will bring transformation. It will purify your heart and your mind. Your consciousness will be purified. You will begin to have realization and understanding about spiritual truth. You begin to see this world completely differently. You look at people, you look at situations with a completely different vision. You will become automatically more peaceful. And because you are beginning to taste something that is actually very pleasant, and it goes from being very pleasant to becoming increasingly sweeter. They use the example from ancient times that when a person has jaundice, when you have, I don't know, I've had jaundice. My first trip to India, my God, it's 1970, a young Kiwi guy brought up in a place where there's no sickness almost. I got violently sick. I got hepatitis, was one of the things that happened. And what happens is when your liver is inflamed and the bile duct is blocked, then the bile that has been produced gets pushed into your bloodstream. And that's why your eyes go yellowish, your skin will go yellowish, your urine is foul smelling. I mean, it's like really bad. And one thing it does is it completely transforms your sense of taste. If you put sugar in your mouth, it is so foul tasting that you can't believe it. It's actually really foul tasting. And in Ayurvedic medicine, one of the things that they advise you to do, apart from rest and just very simple diet, not that you feel like eating, you want to vomit all the time, is you should keep rock candy in your mouth always and suck on it. And it goes, as your condition begins to heal and you become more cured, it goes from being this bitter, really bitter and foul tasting thing to gradually, the sweetness, you begin to perceive it. And eventually, when you are in a healed condition, you taste the actual sweetness of the rock candy. So in a similar, very similar manner, this example is used since ancient times, that by exposing oneself to the influence of this spiritual sound, it is so transformative that it begins to cure the material disease, where we are locked in this idea that this body is me, that I can find happiness here, that the material experience will fulfill me, to beginning to experience something completely different and to see things in a completely different way. And as we become more fulfilled and contented and more happy, the less we are pulled by endless desire that drags people down this road that never ends well. The verse continues and says that from anger, there's a loss of intelligence. And when the intelligence is lost, one is thrust into this very hellish condition, this hellish state. The opposite is true of spiritual life. So what is being taught here is actually incredibly valuable and can completely transform your life and bring you to a state of being actually full of knowledge and awareness, and to be fulfilled and to experience a degree or flavor of happiness that you have not yet experienced. Okay? I think that's about it. We probably went over time. Huh? It doesn't matter. Does anybody have a question? Yeah.
Can one live simultaneously a material and spiritual life?
The answer is no. Because they are founded on two different ideas. They are two different types of pursuits. But just to make it clearer, because we haven't talked about the practical aspect of it, a person that wants to live a spiritual life, it's not that outwardly, that they stop working and they just become a hermit and go live in a cave somewhere or a monastery. That's actually a false idea of so-called renunciation. What one must do is to now have a different focus and a purpose in their life. Instead of doing it for myself and out of an obligation to my family and just all the humdrum stuff, or because I have some great desire, I now begin to see a spiritual connection. I develop a spiritual purpose in my life, and I engage in the same activity, but I'm now doing it for a different reason, and it has a different focus. In the Vedic scriptures, they talk a lot about the law of karma. This word karma means action. It does not denote the fruit of the action. Everybody usually uses karma to denote the reaction, but actually karma is the action. And with every action there will be a reaction. And so all of our actions and activities in this world bind us to the world. But when one begins to act for a higher purpose, their life has a different focus, then we are not bound by our work. In fact, our work becomes an offering in itself to some higher, for some higher end, for some higher purpose. And when we do that, we become actually increasingly spiritually purified by even just doing the so-called mundane things in our life. because the focus is completely changed. And it's really amazing. It's kind of like the principle that they teach in homeopathic medicine, where the cause of a disease can also become the cause of the cure. One example is in India, those guys have got it down with the milk products, man. They make like sweets, like just amazing. But if somebody eats too many sweets, one of the things that will happen is you may end up with diarrhea. And so when a person has this condition, the recommended thing is to take boiled rice and mix it with yogurt and maybe some mashed banana, and to eat that, and it will immediately settle things and cure the condition. So on one hand, the milk was the cause of the problem, and the milk also becomes the solution in the form of yogurt. So in a similar manner, our worldly activities can become transcendental activities. And this is actually a really amazing subject. And this is really what the focus becomes. But I won't go further. Is that okay? You're very welcome. So maybe we'll chant a little bit. Yeah? And, you know, when you have dinner, if you wanted to talk or you've got any questions, I'll be just kind of like, I don't know, somewhere around here. Feel free. It's not a disturbance. I have been kindly invited here by my friends to offer this service to you, which is to pass on that which I have received. So you're not bothering me if you want to ask anything. It is a great privilege for me to try and address your concerns. Okay? Thank you.